Okay, so today I have Khalil Andani with me. He's a religious studies professor. He has a PhD from Harvard. Is there anything else you want to say about yourself, Khalil?
Sure, yeah. So I specialize in the study of Islam. So I'm a historian of ideas within Islam. And more recently, in the last couple of years, I've also gotten involved in the philosophy of religion field, right, where I contribute and engage some of the philosophical problems or issues in the study of religion, bringing a Muslim philosophical perspective.
Okay, great. So, you noticed me from Ryan Mullen's chat of mine with like we were talking about like necessitarianism and stuff, and I am a necessitarian. Right? I don't believe in the kind of libertarian free will. Um, there was a time when I did, when it seemed plausible, but like not anymore. Like after a while, when I like thought of some objections and read like Dirk Perboom, Greg Caruso, also Amy Karofsky. She has a case for necessitarianism, and like heard more about like Spinoza, right, and what he thought of God. Um, and that's how I basically got into necessitarianism, and basically also like watched the chat that Amy Karofsky had with Josh Rasmussen on Joe
Mhm.
Schmidt's channel, Majesty of Reason, and also with chat with Joe Schmidt, and she made a lot of sense, right? She was very clear about stuff and very straightforward too, right? Like no dodging anything, and she sounded very plausible, so that's how I basically got into Nestorianism. I also read her book, basically like going into like the sort of objections that I perhaps had, like with respect to like contingency, free will, and intuitionism. Um, I'm still an intuitionist, but like it's more like when I see the arguments that Nestorians have, my intuitions change basically and go toward Nestorianism. So I want to ask you, like, how did you get into like Necessitarianism?
Yes, so this topic of necessitarianism, it's something I came to recently in the last few years, I would say. And what brought my attention to it is the fact that today we have debates between Christian classical theists, mostly Thomists, and non-classical theists, right? In the field of philosophy of religion, there is a sort of a back and forth that's been going on between these two groups. And one of the arguments against Christian classical theism is the modal collapse argument, which basically says that if God is absolutely simple and timeless and immutable, then God cannot be any other way than he actually is, which means God's will cannot be any other way. God's action cannot be any other way. So, therefore, under this argument in classical theism, God's act of creating this particular world cannot be any other way. That is to say, God's action to create this world is modally necessary. It's the same in all possible worlds. Therefore, this entire creation, the entire cosmos created by God, is also necessary, right? Because the effect of a necessary cause is going to be necessary. It's going to get necessity from the effect. So that is said to be an argument against classical theism. And I knew that I would have to have a response to this argument because I was preparing for a major debate with a Sunni Salafi Muslim named Jake Brancatella. And that debate is online and everyone can go see it. And I prepared for that debate over about 6 months, and I knew this was one of the arguments that he would bring because this guy gets a lot of his stuff from people like Ryan Mullins. And what I had to do is I had to do some deeper research into the Islamic philosophical mystical traditions to see what the Islamic mystics and philosophers had to say about this issue. And what I found actually is that the various Islamic schools of thought, not all of them, but some major Islamic schools of thought, including the Ismailis, which is the denomination that I'm part of, but also the school of Ibn Sina or Avicenna, and the school of Ibn Arabi, who's a famous Sufi Muslim. All three of these schools actually said that yes, uh, God's act of creation is necessary. It cannot be any other way. And the universe actually cannot be any other way. Not only do they believe this, but they actually assert this, right? So they assert necessitarianism. So it's not even seen in these schools of thought as something negative. So that's when it alerted me to the fact that actually, in my tradition and in other Islamic traditions, necessitarianism is affirmed. And what I did following the debate, the year after the debate, I actually published an academic article responding to modal collapse, basically saying that there's no problem with necessitarianism. Necessitarianism is actually the stronger, more coherent theological position and philosophical position. That's the argument that I gave in that paper. Uh, so that's sort of how I've come upon it. And you know, when you actually explore the entailments of necessitarianism, it can actually affect how you view life. And it touches on many related theological and philosophical issues within religion.
Yeah, yeah, you are absolutely correct. And like I said this to like Taylor Sear. I had this chat with Taylor Sear on free will, and like I said, this like Nestorianism seems to be very coherent, right? It's very like a closed system, right? Like a very everything is like very engineered, very like clear, right? There's no bizarre stuff. There's no bizarre stuff like okay, we have libertarian free will and God has like foreknowledge. How does that work, right? Like how does like can I mess up God's plan by my libertarian free will, right? And the issue with contingency is I always thought like so there are some libertarian free will people who just go full open theists, right? So open theism is the view that the future is like radically open, like every proposition that you say about the future is false. um, um, so like future is like radically open. And I always thought like okay, and me and Ryan discussed this, right? The openness of future, right? Like if it depends on like how open you think the future is. It's like if we consider God to have to be omnipotent, right?
Hmm.
Shouldn't he have the power to constrain? Shouldn't he have the power to constrain large amount of possibilities, right? Like basically get rid of them, right? So like one of the things, one of my I guess criticisms of open theists like Thomas J. Ord is that like he's a universalist, right? So on one hand, he wants to say that God does not give up on anyone. He loves everyone. Um, he does not let anyone like permanently die, as in like annihilationism, right? But I always thought like, okay, look, allowing dying, permanent death, I think that sounds like a extra choice, right? An extra possibility, right? Um, so and Thomas J. Ord does not believe that God has that kind of like coercive power, right? So open theists like Ord do not believe that God has the kind of power which like restricts the possibilities, like that coercive power. And I thought, well, then you cannot get universalism, right? Then because maybe there is some real loss, permanent loss, right? Due to like libertarian free will. Some people just permanently
Hmm.
kill themselves, they kill their souls or something, right? And another issue I had with like libertarian free will is like, I always thought like God's actions follow from his nature, right?
Hmm.
And when they follow from his nature, I just don't see any other possibility than just the whatever specific action that follows from his absolute perfection, right? So
Hmm.
it's like if I say now Taylor Sear and I talked about like, so Taylor Sear said to me how God just can eliminate all the bad worlds but allow good worlds that are above a kind of a threshold satisfying bar, right? He can just allow, and he can just pick and choose one of them. But even then I thought like, okay, look, even among them he has certain kind of reason, or like an algorithm already to pick, immediately pick
Hmm.
one of
Yes.
them,
Yeah.
immediately pick one of them. It's like he wouldn't wait to choose, right?
Yeah,
Because
he doesn't have to like think about it and deliberate and be like weigh different options. Like for
yeah,
God,
yeah,
there's no need for a deliberative process. There's no need for that.
yeah, yeah, like he would already have a kind of quickest way. Because look, from my consequentialist perspective, when you wait to do good, when you wait to do good, right, it's like that's still a kind of a loss there, right? Like the waiting time, right? So to me, he would already have the kind of internal mechanism, procedure to deal with
Yeah.
all sorts of like bizarre, like if he encounters certain choices, he immediately picks one. So his actions, even among the good worlds,
Yeah.
are determined and necessary and follow from his absolute perfection, right?
Yeah.
So to me, there is just one world, the actual world, right? There cannot be
Yeah, there's no
any.
real sense in which God looks at a menu of possibilities and
Yeah,
then has to pick. It actually doesn't even make sense to believe that for many reasons. Like, firstly, God, I don't know if you believe God is timeless, but I believe in a timeless God. So the action or the will of a timeless God is also timeless. There's no time involved. There can't be a delay of any sort. Um, if you don't believe in a timeless God, I think one would still believe God is like maximally efficient at at recognizing what his will is. So there should still be no delay. And then if we do presume this idea that God picks like what to create from a menu of possibilities, then isn't that basically saying that mere possibilities like coexist with God? Like
yeah, and
possibilities are now uncreated, so he gets to pick from an uncreated set of possibilities, which doesn't really make much sense if you're a monotheist. Now, maybe if you're a polytheist, you could be okay with that, but it sneaks in a type of Platonism into the worldview, which I don't think most theists, would affirm anyway. So there's many reasons for this, but I agree with what you fundamentally said that what God does and what God wills flows directly from his nature, from what God is. And God's nature, at least in my theology, right? God is necessary in all respects. God is not a mix of necessary properties and some contingent properties. Uh, some neoclassical theists actually would say that God in every possible world has different contingent properties, but he just has the same necessary properties. And I talk about this in my article. Uh, if one posits that God in different possible worlds has different contingent properties that differ across the worlds, we're simply going to ask, what's the explanation for these contingent properties? And there's no the neoclassical theist they can't offer an explanation for those contingent properties of God. They're either going to be explained by God's necessary properties, in which case they should be the same in all possible worlds, or they're going to be brutally contingent, which means God is made up of uncaused, brutally contingent properties that differ across possible worlds, and we have no idea why. And if one believes in brute contingencies within God or for God's choices, right? Then I don't see why we can't be atheists and say the universe is a brutally contingent thing, and we don't need God. We don't need a necessary being or ground. Like as soon as you open the door to brute contingency, to me, the whole project of theism gets undermined.
Yeah, yeah. Like Richard Swinburne seemed to believe like God himself is contingent, right? And I thought, whoa, whoa, like really? So you really believe there's a possible world where God doesn't exist and things are like just chaos, insane there, absolutely insane, like just bizarre stuff happening or something. Like that's just like no, right? Like one of the things like historically, so I mean, I do know like eternal hell and stuff like that has been like part of like Christianity and Islam for a while, at least the traditionalist kind of one, I guess, mainstream ones. And I like so I don't believe in eternal hell. By the way, right? I already told you that. I think if you watched some of my older videos with like Josh Rasmussen, like others, you would find that I'm very like a very strong universalist. Even when I was believed in like libertarian free will, even when I was like a contingentarian, um, I believe God is necessary. Like similar to Ryan, right? Like God is necessary, but some of his actions are like contingent or something. Even when I believe that stuff, I was still like a very very strong universalist. So I was always a universalist. But the issue I started having was like I always thought about like suboptimal worlds, right? Like always thought about like God can always do better, right? Given his perfection, and as you said, right? Like you believe in timeless God. I personally don't believe in timeless God, like, but as you said, right? Like I believe that God is like maximally efficient, right?
Hmm.
It's just absolutely infinite, right? I mean, I also believe like there's no like a max infinity. So I believe like there is a like infinity goes on like greater than other
Yeah,
infinity,
it's
right? Like
unending. Yeah,
yeah, yeah. Like
unlimited.
there's like a Beth to infinity that's like greater than like Aleph null or Aleph zero or something. In mathematics, it's like
Mhm.
some complicated stuff. So I agree with mathematics. I don't want to go against those people, those smart, rigorous people or something. So I say, yeah, sure, there are not like greatest infinity, but there is a level of infinity that God would have that I think would be like think of like divine, like satisficing bar, right? And God always meeting that satisficing bar. And that goes on forever, necessarily, basically, right? So there you go. But now the thing with, I guess, with contingentarian sort of arguments is that like one of the arguments I think Amy Korofsky stated is like as you I think exactly said, any kind of contingency infects everything. Any contingency anywhere actually infects everything,
Hmm.
because it's sort of like I think she had a great small paragraph argument where she basically got a contradiction when you believe that God is necessary but some of his actions are contingent,
Yeah.
right? It was I have the book, but it will take a while to like open that page or something
Yeah,
that
but
specifically
that
like,
holding that view, there are some atheists, and I like Joshua Rasmussen as a philosopher, and I like him as a
yeah,
person, but there are some atheist critiques of his argument for necessary existence, which I sort of you know expanded on, and it's like this. So when Joshua Rasmussen makes an argument for God, right? He directs us to the contingent features of the world. And he asks the question, he says, why are things this way? Right? Like why not only why do these things exist, but why do these things exist in this particular way? Right? What's the explanation of the features of the world as we have it? And then he makes this argument and he says, look, there has to be a necessary foundation to explain why things are the way this way. So far, so good. However, in his book with Proust, after they establish that there's a necessary being as the foundation, and for remember, their definition of necessary being is simply that which exists in all possible worlds. And as I'll explain later, this is actually a very superficial notion of necessity, actually, right? But that's what all the analytic philosophers use. Whatever exists in all possible worlds is modally necessary. So they appeal to a modally necessary being to explain the contingent features of the world because they say, oh, the world could be any way, but why is it like this? So there has to be a necessary being. But after establishing that there's a necessary being, they say that the creative intention of the necessary being to create this world is contingent, right? So the choice of the necessary being to make this particular world is contingent. As soon as you say that, you've lost your explanation of why things are the way they are. Because why things are the way they are, that question will reduce to why did God make this choice? And if you say that God's choice is just contingent and that's it, it didn't have to be that way, and he just chose this, but there's no further necessitating explanation, then actually your argument has not delivered. Like that contingency argument doesn't actually deliver on what it promises to deliver, you know?
Yeah.
Um, in Islamic philosophy, though, we have another idea of necessity. So I'm not sure if you're aware, but according to Avicenna, Ibn Sina, and this is something that everybody after Ibn Sina like picked up this idea from him. So it's pretty mainstream in Islamic thought. So in the Islamic view, there are two types of necessity. Okay. There is that which is necessary due to itself, due to its own essence. So something which cannot be any other way due to what it is, right? And then there's another type of necessity, which is something that is necessary due to something other than itself. So something that is necessary because an external cause necessitated it. So this is called necessary through another. And this type of argument is a better argument for the existence of God. Because what we say is we say, okay, we look at the world is this way. And because the world is this way, like the world is the way it's like that because something made it this way. So something made the world necessary. And either what made the world necessary, like it's either the world is necessary through itself or there's something external to the world which made the world this way. So that's the Avicennan Islamic argument. And what this argument terminates in is there has to be, by logical necessity, there logically exists one simple, ultimate, timeless being that is necessary in itself. And everything else that exists is necessary through another due to being necessitated by the one necessary in itself. And if you've heard what I just said, although everything is modally necessary, at the deeper level, you don't have a modal collapse because only God is necessary in himself. Everything other than God, you, me, the mountains, everything else is necessary due to another, not necessary in itself. So that's a different modal framework, and you don't get a modal collapse. Although in the analytic modal framework, there is a modal collapse, which is just not problematic on this view.
Yeah, yeah, and yeah. I mean, I told Ryan that I'm not that bothered by like modal collapse anymore. Like the sort of main thrust of modal collapse is that okay, look, everything is necessary, but our intuitions are like, come on, like no, it's contingent. I could have like instead of eating biscuits, I could have eaten some chocolate or something, right?
Yeah.
It's contingent, right? It's just so intuitive. But then Amy Korofsky basically in his book goes in detail examining this intuition. She goes into so much detail of metaphysics, like Kit Fine,
Hmm.
so much stuff, right? So much packed stuff in that book. It's a wonderful book, you know. So I think another thing about like necessitarianism is like so when I should mention like I emailed Mohammad Saleh Zarepur, um,
Hmm.
and he said like Ibn Sina is not as strong of a necessitarian as like Amy Korofsky, and I thought okay, sure, I guess. I mean,
Yeah,
not
I read his work on that. I'm not convinced. Like
oh okay.
I don't feel that he really proved that. Um, like he didn't really offer any real evidence as far as I can see. It
Hmm.
may be that I think what he showed is that okay, a lot of Avicenna's comments on necessitarianism apply to like one moment of time. Like the state of affairs in one moment of time, God is necessary and everything else is necessary due to God in one moment of time. And what he's saying is that, well, what about when things change to the next moment of time? Like, how does that work? Like, how is God necessitating the next moment, right? So he's saying, maybe things are not as necessary. But I think if we see in Avicennan philosophy and in Ismaili Neoplatonism, God is timeless. So where does change come from? Because like God is not directly causing the change in material things. So what is? So in Islamic Neoplatonism, God is not the direct source of change, but there's an intermediary entity called the universal soul or the active intellect, and this is the cause of change, basically. So I think if we were to parse out Ibn Sina's view uh, fully, I think it will still be necessitarian. And I have a colleague, his name is Davlat Dadikuda. He's an Avicennan himself, like he's a follower of Ibn Sina. And I think at some point he'll be responding to this idea. And in his view, which I think is correct, Avicenna is a complete necessitarianism, a
Oh,
necessitarian. Yeah. So
oh.
this is disputed at best. Of course, the person you mentioned, I mean, he has his view. I think it's an important debate to have. But
Hmm.
to me, based on what I know of Avicenna, it would be very sort of incongruent if Avicenna is not really a necessitarian, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, and you know, one of the things was with Necessitarianism, I think, is like Necessitarianism, interestingly, I think kind of makes it like, I mean, not kind of, it makes it hard to justify eternal hell. I,
Mhm.
you know,
No,
Uh,
I do believe that if you are a necessitarian,
hmm,
then and I believe that all the logical reasons support being a necessitarian. I really do. I think that entails that there's going to be universal salvation at the end. I think there's a temporary hell. I think like every soul will eventually find itself in God's mercy, but like how the path that the soul takes to get there, those will all be different,
hmm,
and some souls may have to pass through hell. But then the purpose of hell is not really punishment per se. The
hmm,
purpose of hell is rehabilitation, like cleansing the soul, purifying the soul of all these impurities that it's acquired, all these impure accidents that it's acquired, you know. And in the end, the soul should be reformed by the hellfire, and eventually be received into divine mercy for eternity at the end.
brother. I love you. It's that's absolutely. I mean, yeah, that's pretty much correct. I mean, so one of the things that um I guess some of the non-necessitarians say is like okay, look, um are we just puppets then, right? Like they
Mm.
just kind of use this word puppet, right? Like the analogy I would like I should mention when I believed in libertarian free will, this analogy actually still did not make any sense to me. Like, are we just puppets or something? Is God a puppet of his like himself? And I like
Oh,
because
it's got a puppet of himself.
yeah, it's like is God a slave to his own perfection? Is God a
Yeah.
slave to his own desires? And I'm like, what a stupid way to think about. I mean, it's like Neil. I so there's a philosopher named Neil Sinha Babu. Now he's an atheist, and he wrote a like a defense of a kind of human
Humian?
humanism.
Yeah.
David Hume. So
Yes.
humanism about like desires.
Okay.
And one of the things he says in the book that I loved is like we are not slaves to our desires, we are our like own desires, right?
Mm,
It's not
yeah.
like we are
Yeah.
slaves to our desires. It's a strange thing to say, like slave to our desires. Like slavery inherently involves that you want to do something that makes you happy but you're not allowed to do that thing, right?
Yeah.
Someone else.
Slavery involves being subjugated to someone else or something else,
Someone
external.
else's desires, right?
Yeah.
Someone else's desires, they don't match with yours. You're in pain, right?
Hmm.
You're in pain. You are in a sad, horrific,
Yeah, and
tragic
your will,
situation.
your personal will is being overrided,
Yep.
right? That's what slavery would entail. But this goes to because people, I mean, what you're right when you say this, that even Mullins and others, they said, oh, under necessitarianism, God is not free, right? And similarly, they would say, we are not free. And I think this attitude is more reflective of the political environment that we live in. So, like, we live in a certain culture that prioritizes freedom, right? And freedom here is often defined in negative terms. It's like a freedom from constraints, the freedom to do whatever I want, the freedom to do otherwise, this sort of thing. And I think this is a case where people's theology has been radically influenced by the culture that they live in.
Absolutely nailed it, right? Like I literally believe that this, like, I think this is absolutely true. Like this liberalism, right? This political
Hmm.
liberalism where liberty is so important. Like I would always think no one cares about this much liberty, like in real, even in real life, when you see people's behavior, like, um, so like there are countries which are very like authoritarian.
Yeah.
People
Yeah.
seem to not like do revolutions in those countries. They seem to be fine. They
No, it's
don't.
true. There are some old surveys that some people have said in some countries, third world countries, or even South American countries, that like they would rather live under a dictator with stability than rather live in a democracy but with instability.
Yeah, exactly, right, exactly right. And like people fundamentally care about safety, right? Like it's you don't want to enjoy a freedom where you get mailed your like your family member is killed and the body parts are mailed to you, right? That's disturbing stuff. Like, you don't want that kind of freedom. Like like Thomas Jefferson said, I'd rather die than live in like an autocracy, autocracy or something. I mean, I don't know. Like it was like, no, you wouldn't. No, you wouldn't. Dude, come on. Just don't be ridiculous. It's just a rhetoric, right? It's not a real thing. If you were surrounded by horrific stuff, you don't want to get out, right? You don't want to get out. So it's like libertarian free will defenses of eternal hell. um I I really dislike them, right? Like just people say just bizarre stuff that Like Aquinas didn't believe that stuff. Aquinas and Augustine were like, eternal hell is torture, bro. Yeah, you would want to get out of eternal hell. It's not like C.S. Lewis view,
Mhm.
right? You are going to be tortured. You are going to suffer forever, right? So
Yeah,
it's
so
like,
I think what we have to do, and I do this in my article, so we have to redefine what it means to have free will, right?
yeah,
So
yeah,
for libertarians, free will is defined in terms of the ability to do otherwise, right? And this idea of alternate possibilities, like that's how that's what they think free will is. But look, but why do we have to accept that? So another definition of free will, which you find this in, I don't know if you've read Jonathan Edwards, but he's a necessitarian, basically, a Christian necessitarian.
Edwards.
Jonathan Edwards, yeah. If he, I used him as an example in my paper when I challenged Ryan Mullins because Mullins said that, look, you know, Christian theologians believe that God is free and this is what it means, and I said no. We have exceptions. There are some, not all Christians believe this. And Jonathan Edwards, uh, he's a necessitarian through and through, right? For God and for us. So, in the Islamic tradition, we have many necessitarians. So here's a different view of will. Um, a different view, a different view of free will would be something like if the agent wills, he will do the act, and if he does not will it, he will not do the act, right? So, again, I'll repeat that. If the agent wills, he will do the act. If he does not will it, he will not do the act. So that's free will. That's what free will actually is. Free will is the ability to do what you will. Now, where does that come from, right? Like where does the ability to will come from? Like what you will or what I will and what God wills, if you really think about it, you want to say that what I will follows or flows directly from who I am,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
That's what you want.
Yeah.
That's what necessitarianism says. The,
Yeah.
the action and the choice of the agent is necessitated by the agent and whatever is internal to the agent. That's necessitarianism. How is that making me a puppet? I'm the one doing it. I'm responsible for my action. My choice is a direct expression of my beliefs, my values, my goals, and so on, right? Um,
Yeah.
on libertarian free will, however, you have my choice, my actions, my values, all this stuff, and then I have two choices, but nothing about me will determine choice A or B. Like there's a break. There's a
Yeah.
break between who I am and my choice. So, what was going to determine A or B? Like, what's determining my choice? It's not me. So, what is it? It's something outside of me. It's either a brute contingency or something else has to intervene and tip the scales. In either case, in libertarian free will, I would argue I'm not really in control of my choice.
And like one of the things I talked with a great philosopher just like a few, I think a few months ago, right? Jordan Wesley, right? And Jordan Wesley believes in libertarian free will, and he when I asked like where is the action coming from, right? Like where is it, right? Like what's the thing that's like moving, and ultimately he did bite that bullet that there seems to be a real randomness here, right?
Mm,
A real randomness, like you are
yeah,
not making decision based on everything in the past, based
yeah.
on every causal event in the past, based on your own nature. You are doing something other than what your own nature
Mm-hmm,
would
mm-hmm.
lead to, right?
Yeah,
Like there's a real indeterminacy there. And I
yeah.
thought that would like that would scare
Yeah,
that's
that's scary, right? That's actually
right.
very scary because then when somebody does something and then they get punished for it, well, why are they being punished? They didn't really
Yeah.
do it, right?
Yeah,
You
and
really
it's
do.
also like, and it's also like, so God randomly sometimes would just decide to not make a world, or wait, like something, like
Yes.
not do something, or like just make a world that is less than the best, or I guess less than. He might say like, okay, they are all about satisfying bar, but it's still like, okay, but still he could. It's like, if there is no like, there no way to like predict,
Mm.
right? It's sort of like I do understand that, like Josh Rasmussen, even though he believes in this like
Well, I'll
kind of
tell you
libertarian,
what his thing was. Could I share the screen?
yeah, sure.
Okay, I
Let
just
me
want to show.
see.
I have just what on what we're talking about. I
Yeah,
have okay. Yeah, I'll have to send a request on the Zoom.
yeah, okay, I allowed you
Okay,
to share.
so just on what you're mentioning, right? Like, okay, so how does God's thing work and so on. So I'm gonna show you this diagram from my article on this topic. So I
Yeah,
don't know, you should be able to see it here.
okay, now I see the screen now.
Okay, you can see this, right?
Yeah,
Okay, so on what you have here is necessitarian versus libertarian models of divine will. So the black is a necessitarian model, and the gray is a libertarian model. So under necessitarianism, you have God, necessary existence, fully explains, let's say, like whatever God ends up doing. Okay. So in necessitarianism, God's existence fully explains God's contingent choice. Okay. Like fully explains it. So God's contingent choice becomes necessary due to God. That's necessitarian divine will. Okay, so God's will is necessary because of what God is. And that's it.
yeah,
That's all you're done. Now, under libertarian divine will, it's really messed up. So you have God who, let's say he's necessary existence, and then they would say that God has contingent attributes in different possible worlds. So in this possible world, God has some contingent properties. He has different ones in the other worlds, and so on. Okay, so then where do these come from though? Like what explains God's contingent attributes? The best that a libertarian will say is God's necessary existence partly explains his contingent attributes, but not fully.
yeah,
Then you have God's contingent choice. Okay? Well, what explains that? Well, God's existence and attributes partly explains his contingent choice, but not fully. So where's the
okay.
rest of the explanation? Well, the only thing you can say is self-explains. Like the contingency
Yeah,
has to explain itself. So there
yeah,
are like this is brute contingency. And actually, if you look at this under libertarian divine will, you just said this, God in his necessary existence is not in real control over what he ends up doing. It's
yeah,
just
yeah.
left to brute chance.
Yeah, and like I like, so Josh is a universalist, and he's like a confident universalist. Now he's not an open theist, I should mention. So I think he would go on to say what me and Ryan discussed, which is that God's power is greater than the openness or like the possibilities in the world. So like he just God allows all worlds above like a satisfying bar. But even my issue is like, first of all, it's like a very complex, right? Like there's like contingencies.
Yeah.
Sometimes God makes like 1 million happy people, sometimes he makes like 1 trillion happy people, and it's like, well, why not make
This
1
is
trillion in both worlds, right? It's
this
sort
is
of
what
like,
they but this is what Josh and Proust said. They said God is a necessary being who has an indeterministic tendency to produce a particular contingent effect. A
oh,
tendency. He has a I don't even know what that means. It's like God has a tendency. There's like a probability that God will produce something, but it's not necessary. So there's still chance here then.
I mean, probably it's like it's very weird, complex, like there's so much. stuff in there. So rather, like, yeah, for us necessitarians, we would like to say, like, if God, like, let's just assume God is stuck in, like, as in, like, there are two equally different, equally valuable choices, right? Let's just
Yeah.
assume that. Like it, like
Hmm.
Buridan's donkey dilemma is, so that dilemma
Yeah.
is basically like a donkey is located at, like, equally distant foods, right? I guess on
Yeah.
right side there is like a food, on left side there is also like same food or something, or like water. And what does donkey do? Now
Hmm.
my view is that, like, there are a bunch of algorithms that God himself, and I think even little donkeys, like, even like actual experiments have been conducted on, like, rats, where they are placed, like, equally distant. And how do they make choices? They do make choices. They do not, like, get paralyzed or something. So God will also make choices. And my view is that it's not indeterministic. God has inbuilt algorithms, like actual algorithms that we, like, in computer science, there are, like, algorithms like first come, first
Yeah.
serve, right?
Yeah. So
Sorting algorithms, basically.
they're parameters basically that would.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And those sorting algorithms, with those sorting algorithms, different situations lead to different sorting algorithms being selected. So it's
Hmm.
all deterministic. There is no indeterminacy in God.
Yeah,
Full
because
stop.
God's internal, if you believe that God has attributes or whatever, God's internal attributes should be sufficient to
Yes.
necessitate the desired effect. They should be
Yes.
sufficient. There should be nothing left to, oh, well, maybe he might do this. Why, well, why? Why is
Why?
it that God created this world instead of anything else? So if this world is A and anything other than this world is B, okay? So
Yeah.
why did God create A? Why? What's the explanation? There has to be a reason. Why did he create A as
Yeah.
opposed to anything other than A? Another way to think about this, and I wrote this in the paper too, um, in a sense, the libertarian is a sort of a weak necessitarian, in a sense. Here's why.
Yes.
Here's
Yeah.
why. So, would you agree that God creating this world, from a contingency point of view, God creating this world is contingent? Yeah?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. God creating another world is also contingent, right?
Yeah.
Okay. God creating nothing, isn't that also contingent? That's a
Yep.
contingent state of affairs, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So therefore, under the libertarian model, it is necessary that God creates contingency of some sort,
Yeah. That's clever.
right? It's still
That's pretty
necessary. Like, I'm not saying it's necessary for God to create. It's necessary for God to actualize a contingent state of affairs. He cannot fail to do that under their model,
Yep. 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 That's
right? So
clever.
God doesn't have the free in their terms, God does not have the freedom to do otherwise than making a contingent state of affairs. He just doesn't have that freedom. So you see, when God doesn't have absolute freedom, all you and I are saying is we're saying, yeah, God doesn't have absolute freedom, and we're just demarcating very clearly, right, what that freedom is. That's it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like, why can God contingentize himself into necessitarianism?
Yeah.
Right.
Right? And, God cannot create I mean in their view, God must create a contingent state of affairs. He can't create a necessary state of affairs. Our view says God creates a necessary state of affairs,
Yeah.
right? So we're both necessitarians in a way.
Yeah. Yeah. Fantastic. You are doing great work, Khalil. And I hope to, I also want to tell me the name of that another scholar who's going to respond to Muhammad Saleh Zarepur,
Well, I don't
right?
know when he's responding, but I know he's written a blog post and he said he will respond. So
Yeah. Tell me
I'll
his,
try to find it actually. So his name is Davlat Dadi Kuda. Like that's his name.
oh,
Um, and he's already published on Avicenna like several articles.
okay,
So
okay. So
like
be
if
sure
anything on
to,
Avicenna, I just go to him, like he's my go-to.
that's very nice. I'm going to also, like, go to him. when I think about this stuff more. I should also mention, Khalil, I want to talk about like how did you get to like universalism? Like, was it before you became necessitarian or like after necessitarian?
No, I was already sort of a universalist before, but it wasn't based on an intellectual position. Basically, like from my perspective, I have like I guess you could say I've always had this inner sense that like a truly all merciful God w will not allow people to go to hell for eternity. Like that just doesn't make sense, you know. And also like this certain idea. There's sort of a universalism in the Quran, at least when it comes to like people of other religions. You know, the Quran says they can all go to heaven. Um, Certain things that the
Yeah,
Ismaili Imams have said, like the Aga Khans have said, sound very much like universalism. And also, there is a tradition within Islam among the mystics of Islam. So people like Ibn Arabi, Mullah Sadra, even Ibn Taymiyyah, of all
even
people,
Tamia, yeah, yeah,
yeah, that hell is going to end, or at least the suffering in hell ends. Like the fire of hell is going to end, and everybody will end up in divine mercy at the end
yeah,
of the day. There is a minority tradition in Islam
in Islam,
on
yeah,
this.
yeah.
It's minority, but like it's there. Like it's still a strong.
It's there.
It has good arguments going for it, and if you
Yeah,
are sort of if one is a Islamic Neoplatonist like myself. Like universalism is like the only thing that really makes sense, like within that
yeah,
paradigm.
yeah.
Like, why would
So
God fail to bring certain souls into His mercy? Like,
yeah,
why would
yeah.
He fail? There's no reason.
There's there- there's like it's like when I should mention, Khalil, when I became a theist. Now when I became a theist, I did not, so I was not immediately an Nestorian, right? Like I became Nestorian like a few years later, when I like encountered Amy Karofsky, Spinoza, right? Those two. But when I was not a Necessitarian, when I became a theist, universal salvation or like universal happiness, and by the way, I'm including non-human animals too, like
Okay.
your pets, your dogs, your cats, right? Elephants, all these animals who suffer a lot, right? Dinosaurs, right? They all they all shall eventually go to heaven. They shall chill with God, enjoy their time. Cat will be like playing with cotton balls or something, right? Just chilling, right? And it was non-negotiable. Like universalism is non-negotiable. Like if universalism is false, theism is false. Like immediately, right? To
Mm.
me, that's the kind of strong connection I had. Like and I also saw like all sorts of stuff, right? Like I discussed this with like Josh Rasmussen and like other universalists about that status principle argument where like if you offend a being with like infinite dignity, you accrue infinite guilt and
Yeah,
deserve infinite
this
punishment.
never made sense to me. So
And
that's a whole other issue. But like to me, this penal substitution atonement theory doesn't make any sense. I know it's not all Christians hold to it, but you know, it just
yeah,
it doesn't.
yeah, and the whole thing with that kind of retribution, right? Like I always thought even like literal actual retribution that people do in real life, it is based on some decent level of harm or suffering that they
Mhm.
felt, right? And interestingly, a bunch of like infernalist Christian eternal hell believing like philosophers literally argued that God feels infinite pain when you offend
Really?
him.
God
Like
feels pain.
they literally argued that God feels infinite pain. That's why it is justified to cause infinite pain to human beings. And I
Mm.
thought, ridiculous, ridiculous. What,
But
what?
I think the problem among many theists is
Yeah.
there's a lot of anthropomorphizing going on, right? Like we just project like human response, human emotion, human senses of pride and offense, and we just project that onto God. And we say, oh, well, because I would be offended, then God will be offended infinitely.
But
There's
I'm
there's
not
too much of
infinitely
that.
offended.
But there's just too much of that. Like in theology, I find that there's just too much of that. I'm an apophatic theologian. Like I don't like to describe God positively, you know.
Mm.
That's the tradition I follow, and I think that's a logically,
Yeah,
cogent.
and I think the issue is also, Khalil, is like they want to anthropomorphize God, but still in a bizarre, insane way or something. Like,
Mm.
okay, we don't feel infinite pain. How then God feels infinite pain from some? So like if someone stole $2, like a soda can, bro. Like, come on, soda can from a vending machine. He's like in infinite pain. And I basically also like I made a by
Well,
the way,
isn't
like
God self-sufficient? So how could, like, in reality, how could God be offended by anything? Like, in reality, like, God is self-sufficient. Uh, God, there's no scarcity from God's perspective.
they're like arguing from like a neoclassical perspective. So they also literally say that um there are different levels of how much infinite pain. So it's like they talk about infinite in duration and then like infinite in intensity. And I always think, okay, wait. If you want to do this stuff, then consider this, right? So suppose someone stole $2 from a soda can from a vending machine. God is infinitely offended, but the infinity of offenses goes like this: every 1 trillion years, he gets plus 1 unit of pain, just that. And other
Okay.
times he's just extremely happy. But every 1 million years, he gets like very small 1 unit of pain. And as a retribution, he does that to the human being. So every 1 trillion years, the guy gets 1 unit of pain. Like think of like getting slapped a bit every 1 trillion years. But all the other time, you're extremely happy. And if those theists want to say you are in eternal hell because of that, you are being eternally punished, universalists are like, okay, I guess, sure. I mean, like, is that a punishment? Is that really a punishment? Like, it's ridiculous, right? It's so like the people should just chill out, like they just should just accept, like, look, man, some of the stuff in the tradition can be wrong. It can be due to politics. It can be due to keeping people in line. It can be due to like the sociological issues at that time, right? It need not be because of like actual truth, actual genuine philosophical interaction, right? It can be due to like at that time it needed to be that way or something. So I mean, like, come on, chill out with like eternal hell and stupid stuff like that. I also want to ask you, Khalil, like, so um, you you already debated Salafis, and you also debated like ex-Muslims, like apostate prophet, and with
I
one
debated Trinitarians as well. Those were much more fun.
Trinitarians as well. Yeah. So, one of the things I always thought is like, so when I see these like far right or like right wing religious conservatives from like each religion debate each other, uh, some of the stuff they say about each other is actually true, like they make sense. But then I always think like, don't you guys like in during debates they always treat it like sport, right? Like our guy won, our guy like won, like there's if this is like a boxing match, right? rather than like rather than like, okay, we are looking for like truth. We are looking to refine worldview, right? We're trying to see, okay, there's an issue there and there's an issue there, or there's an issue in that specific proposition, right? That's not that. It's like Jake destroyed Chris, what's his name? Chris Date.
Chris Date,
Chris
yeah,
Date.
I saw that one. Yeah.
Yeah, Jake destroyed Chris Date, or
Mm.
apostate prophet destroyed Muhammad Hijab or something. I mean, it's like there's so much bizarre way to conduct this stuff, right? Like this is not a boxing match. You don't you don't do it this way. Now both I think both sides sometimes make a point, and one of the side do make some important points that are more plausible than the other side, right? That make more sense. um, that happens in debates, but it's not like I mean, like the kind of way they do this, they do this. It's always like it's always very belligerent,
Hmm.
very, very angry, and both sides are literally claiming victory, right? Like Jake won, no, Chris won the debate, right? And I would always think, what's the point? What's the point of these debates? It's like they seem to go
You know,
nowhere.
I mean, it's a good question. So here's what I've noticed that look,
Yeah,
inherently, there's no point to these debates. All right, like in itself, there's no point.
yeah,
However, I know that the internet is the first stop for people today to learn about religion. It is.
yeah,
I don't
yeah, yeah,
recommend it, but it is. And YouTube, like everyone, like people don't read anymore. They want to be entertained. Okay.
yeah,
The people want entertainment. So they go to
yeah,
YouTube. You know, you're walking or you're at the gym or doing something, you want to listen to something interesting, you go to YouTube, right? You're not going to most
yeah.
people are still not reading audiobooks. So I got involved in these debates. I don't do it often, and I have a policy now. I'm only going to debate academically trained people.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
you know, I do these debates once in a while because to me, I can use the medium even though it's a debate format, I can still use the medium for the sake of public education.
yeah,
The
yeah.
perspectives that I bring, if it's not like the YouTube debate format, is just going to enable me to reach a lot more people than writing a journal article,
Yeah, that's true. And I
right?
also do sometimes think like if you convince even one right-wing fascist to like
Yeah.
stop being a fascist, right? Stop being like a theocrat or something, that would be a wonderful thing to do, right? Like to so yeah, I do think that there is that point of debate, I guess. And by the way, like even sometimes I get into the debate mode, like no, Khalil destroyed that other dude, like Khalil was correct. And I also sometimes get into that mode when like people are like really annoying, belligerent and stuff. But like so in general, I I'm willing to like I'm open to debating people, but I I would always debate with like a PowerPoint too.
So
So
with a
that
PowerPoint.
with a PowerPoint, yeah,
Yeah,
with
I'm the same way though.
presentation.
Yeah.
I actually I love your approach. I saw that in every single debate you used, I think, PowerPoint,
Yes.
and that's really important to like for citations and stuff like that. So
Hmm.
because without PowerPoint, it's like people are unable to catch stuff. Um, One of the things I want to ask you, Khalil, is what like when you are not in mainstream, like as in like you do know that you are a universalist and your view like Ismailis are the minority, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
So um like were you ever like in the majority ever?
I don't know if Ismailis were ever in the majority, like numbers wise, but there was a time when I would say in around I would say 10th century, 11th century, where the Ismailis were politically active and religiously active, and Ismailis, I mean, Ismaili beliefs were quite popular. Like they were very appealing, and they were spreading throughout the Muslim world to the point where a lot of what we today call Sunni Islam came together and formed a lot of its views in response to the Ismailis.
oh
So that's
oh
how, so I could say Ismaili Islam was like on the ascendant in the 10th and 11th centuries. And it had wide appeal to people.
oh
And it's because of widespread persecution and the loss of a political state that makes Ismailis a minority today. Like
oh
that has a lot to do with it. So, history, in some possible world that which we know doesn't exist because there's only one possible world, but in a sort of hypothetical possible world, you know, it could have been that the Ismailis are maybe not the majority, but like half of the Muslim community could have been Ismailis if things had turned out differently.
Yeah, I mean, I think in future it will be, because I think with these open discussions, open debates, sometimes I do think people do introspect and think like, hey, look, I'm being like very toxic, right? With my right-wing beliefs. I'm like being very harming people for like no reason, or like very bad, very poor reasons. I'm ruining relationships, friendships. And I don't seem like a compassionate person. They probably do sometimes think, like, what am I doing with my life, bro? Um, so yeah, yeah, you are an historian, right? You are a historian, and and I think, like, I did not know about this, like Ismaili being like a pretty popular in like 10th 11th century. Where can I like read more about this?
Um, well, I mean, there's an institution called the Institute of Ismaili Studies, and they publish a lot of academic work on Ismaili history and thought. So and like you could get books from there. Like a good easy book on Ismailis is just called A Short History of the Ismailis. And it's like a short book, gives you a history of the whole movement, including these periods where Ismailis were politically ascendant and this sort of thing. So there's much more information available today than there used to be maybe 20 years ago.
Is this the Khalil? I think I see Davlat Dadi Khuda's profile.
Yeah,
Is this person? Let me share my screen. Is this the person?
yeah. So he's, as you can see, he has all these published articles, right, on Avicenna, and he would be the guy to talk to, in my opinion, on Avicenna's views on different matters.
Okay, yeah, he has a bunch of stuff. Yeah, cool stuff. I think.
Yeah,
Okay,
this
I'm
is
gonna.
not even all of it because I don't know how often he uses academia, but like he's published other articles that you don't see here. You
Ah,
have to
okay, okay,
Google,
gotcha.
probably have to Google him
Gotcha,
a bit.
gotcha. One of the things I also want to say, Khalil, is like when I see like Ridwan, like just he sort of like essentializes Islam to like
He
Muhammad
does.
Hijab's version is the only version,
Yeah.
right? Hijab's version is the only version, like the Salafi version is the only version, right?
Hmm.
and and that's like, look, that could be done with Christianity too, by the
Yeah,
way,
of
right?
course.
And
Can be
like,
done
so
with
if
any religion. Yeah.
any religion, right? So like let me show you like what like John Calvin and Thomas Aquinas said about heretics, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah. Aquinas says heretics should be killed and
yeah,
apostates should be killed. Augustine says they should apostates and heretics should be forced to become Christian. Like that's what Augustine says. So these are all like the medieval people. They all think the same way. It seems.
yeah, yeah. Can you see the screen, by the way? Like
Yeah,
this.
yeah. I can see.
So
Yeah.
so this is John Calvin, by the way, right?
Okay.
So Michael Servetus, he's talking about Michael Servetus. So Michael Servetus was a person. By the way, he was not like a progressive leftist,
Mm.
like a religious person. He simply was like, at that time he denied the Trinity, right?
Okay.
Just that, and he was
Mhm.
not violent, right? He was not a violent heretic who was killing other people or something. He just denied the Trinity. And John Calvin like was became so angry at
Mhm.
one point. So he called Servetus arrogant, right?
Mhm.
And said, if he comes here and I have any authority, I will never let him leave the place alive.
Mhm.
This is Calvin, right?
Yeah, and the
Like,
thing is, people need to know that in medieval kingdoms, whether Christian or Muslim, your public religious affiliation was an expression of your citizenship, you know? So in a Christian kingdom or in a Muslim kingdom, if you publicly renounced the faith, you
yeah,
were just seen as a treasonous person. That's what it meant to be an apostate. Now with secularization, that doesn't exist anymore, right? We have
Yeah,
different notions of citizenship, but in the medieval era, this was pretty normal.
yeah, and yeah, exactly, right. And it's like I like before the medieval time, I think I read like the caliphates during like Umayyad and those caliphates, there were like actual atheist philosophers,
Yes,
right?
they were. We have, I mean, we have records of debates in the caliphal court. I brought this up to apostate when I went on Apostate Prophets stream a few years ago. Like I brought this up, and he really had nothing to say about that. Like he
Yeah,
didn't have a response. He was like, "Oh, well, that's not you're a liar. Oh, well, how am I'm a liar. The people I'm quoting are liars. Apparently, everybody's a liar. You know, if we
yeah,
don't match if we don't match confirmation bias. So
yeah.
people
It's
don't
like
know. They don't know their history.
yeah, and like this is Aquinas, by the way. So Calvin was very like said like to Servetus, I'm going to get him killed. Aquinas was also very clear, right? That like so this is like whether heretics ought to be tolerated. This is Aquinas on heresy. Um, so he says, wherefore, if forgers of money and other evildoers are forthwith condemned to death by the secular authority, much more reason is there for heretics, as soon as they are convicted of heresy, to be not only excommunicated, but even put to death, right?
Mhm.
Like
Yeah.
explicit. And he did not just talk about violent heretics. It's literally whether
All
they are
heretics.
non-violent or not, doesn't
Yeah,
matter,
yeah. All
right?
heretics. Yes.
All
And this is
heretics.
standard. Like what Aquinas says, this is not an outlier. At that time, this is what Christendom believed. Like this is how Christendom was. You can even go back further. I mean, have you heard of the Edict of Theodosius?
No, I have not heard that. I have
Okay, here.
heard
So this is even another example. So I'll just show it to you. You can even find this on like this is on Wikipedia, for
yeah.
example. Like you
You
can
can, yeah,
find it.
yeah, you
So
can.
so this is basically a two or three, I think 1 year or 1 year before the council of the Council of Constantinople, where they finalized the Nicene Creed. So 1 year before that, so in the year 380, the Emperor Theodosius, Roman Emperor, issued this edict, and here's the translation of it. Okay, and I'm just going to highlight this. So you can see he says, according to the apostolic teaching of the doctrine of the gospel, let us believe in the one deity of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost, the Holy Spirit, in equal majesty and in a holy Trinity. So he's basically saying you all have to believe in the Trinity, right?
Yeah,
And then he says, if if they don't, right? Like we order the followers of this law to embrace the name of Catholic Christians, but as for the others, since they are foolish madmen, we decree they shall be branded with the ignominious name of heretics, shall not presume to give to their conventicles the name of churches. They will suffer, in the first place, the chastisement of the divine condemnation, and in the second, the punishment of our authority, which, in accordance with the will of heaven, we shall decide to inflict.
yeah,
The
like
same thing,
literal.
same idea, right? If you're a heretic, in the if you're a public heretic, you're going to be punished.
Yep, yep,
This is how it
exactly,
works.
right, exactly.
So, but
So
but what do you think of this? Because I find that when I bring up historical examples of this, like what you just showed, what I showed, um, some of the Christians say, "Oh, well, this is not in the gospel, so like we don't have to believe. Like this is not our like they say this is not part of our religion because it's not in the Bible." But apparently, everything that a Muslim jurist says, 500 years after the Prophet, that's part of Islam,
yeah,
right? But
yeah,
what
yeah.
what Aquinas says, what Augustine says, what Theodosius, that's not part of Christianity. I mean, what do you think of that? Because I hear this response all the time. They just the Christian who I'm talking to, and I never bring this up, um, unsolicited, right? I bring this up when people come and say, "Oh, Islam is this, and you guys have a punishment, apostasy." Then I say, "Okay, let's look at Christianity." So I find that many Christians are not willing to entertain historical Christianity as
Yeah.
Christianity, but historical Islam is Islam.
Yeah, this is like a hypocrisy, right? Double standard, right? It's sort of like, like there's this dude, I don't know what's his name, I think Lewis or something, I'm not sure, like, and he like brought a bunch of books by jurists of Islam, and like there were some disturbing things in there, and I thought,
Yeah,
okay, well, look, you can do this with Christianity, right? like like you can do this with Christianity, right? Like
yeah.
it's like, come on, right? It's not like 2 billion Muslims actually believe this stuff, what he said. I think his name was Lloyd or something. Yeah,
Hmm.
Lloyd or something, Lloyd de Jong or something. And
What you need to look at is there's so many papal bulls during the Middle Ages
yeah,
that basically authorize a Christian king or prince to subjugate, conquer, destroy all the domains of non-Christians.
yeah. And interestingly, like one of the things, like Daniel Hakikachu was debating David Wood.
Yeah.
And one of the points Daniel Hakikachu did bring is like you are not, like right now you are liberals, but
Yeah.
your history is not, you absolutely, you were not liberals. And in fact, like recent Christian nationalists like literally are like doing those Aquinas type of stuff. Like Stephen Wolfe is like a Christian nationalist, and he believes in like all this stuff: punishment for heresy, punishment for apostasy, punishment of like LGBT people. And like, have you heard of like Catholic integralists like Adrian Vermeule? um, Catholic integralist Thomas Pink, Adrian Vermeule, like these intellectuals. Like Adrian Vermeule is also very, clear. Like the state should mandate Catholicism, basically, right? So like, and like he's an actual intellectual, by the way. So not just like some internet debate bro, right? Like Adrian Vermeule, like actual intellectual. And I thought, like, so your right wing guys are doing the exact things that you accuse like Muslim people of doing, right? And they just essentialize stuff. It's sort of very, it also gets like very racist, where they call people like Abduls.
Oh, I know.
Like it's also gets like very racist. And I thought, imagine if everybody called you like Bob or something. Like, what the fuck? You the scumbags. Like, don't be
No,
racist, all right?
there is a lot of racism because a lot of this is like is driven by sort of tribalism,
Yeah,
like a ethno-nationalist tribalism. It's cultural identity politics, this sort of thing, and these people they just use because for them Islam is Arab, like Muslims, Arabs, brown people, like we're all the same for these types of people. This is just like when people attack Muslims today and they say, "Oh, Muslims are violent, Muslims are this." Usually, this is to cover up another kind of violence
yeah.
that is being committed by certain powers.
Yeah, exactly. And like Sam Harris, there. Look,
No,
I feel
he's
embarrassed
one of
to
the
admit.
worst. He's one of the worst
Yeah,
culprits of what I'm talking about.
yeah. And look, I feel embarrassed. Like there was a time when I was nearing like a bigger or something. I apologize to you. Like I feel embarrassed. I feel sad that like 5 or I think 10 years ago. 10 years
Mhm.
ago, I was kind of a bigot because of like people like Sam Harris. I was also like a militant atheist.
Mm.
And when I basically read more, like Sam Harris just said bizarre stuff, like how he said like these conflicts going on in Middle East is because of like Islam. And I was
Yeah, he
like,
thinks it's because Muslims believe in martyrdom. Apparently, according to Sam Harris, Muslim belief in martyrdom is the only variable in every conflict.
yeah,
That's
it's not.
that's what he thinks.
It's not like like the bombings and
Yeah,
like
like
all
apparently
those
the
horrible.
Iraq War has nothing to do with it.
Yeah,
nothing to do with it.
nothing. Afghanistan war has nothing to do
Yeah,
with
nothing
it.
to do with it. But
All those.
Sam Harris said in his book End of Faith, he said um America or Western powers, he said, and you can find this quoted online. He said Western powers should subjugate Muslim populations under dictators because Muslims cannot be trusted to vote with democratic rights. That's what he said.
What,
You know?
like, just
He
straight up.
also said we are at war with Islam. That's his own words. I show this to my students usually at the beginning of the semester. He says we're at war with Islam. That's what he
Just,
says.
yeah, I mean,
And,
it's
and
like,
and all these people, like all these atheists, these militant atheists, Sam Harris, Richard Dawkins, they're all pro Middle East intervention. They all happen to be pro war. You know, all this stuff. And like as soon as you get their political views, then it sort of becomes very suspect.
yeah,
Basically,
yeah, and
none of
it's
these
like, it's
people
just,
preach nonviolence or any of this stuff. The other thing is they misrepresent. I mean, a lot of people don't know this, but even the traditional Islamic teaching on war. Like if you take out those books by jurists, Muslim jurists, like contemporary to Aquinas, right? And if you read their war theory, for its time, it's actually a pretty ethical war theory. Like you're not allowed to target civilians in that type of warfare. Like according to Muslim rules of war, you can't target. There's like a whole list of non-combatants which you can't target. Like you're not allowed. Western. I don't know. I don't want to say civilization, but like Western nations, they didn't arrive at the concept of a non-combatant until like the last 100, 200 years.
yeah, yeah. I mean,
Like
it's
that's a
like, it's
very
also
new
like,
thing. That's a very new thing. And even today, the idea of a non-combatant in Western wars is still not firmly established because they'll count like every man over a certain age will just be counted as a combatant, you know? So Islamic theories of war, even though they traditionally now in pre-modern times, Muslim jurists did allow offensive war. They did, as long as it was commanded by an authority, a legitimate authority. I mean, Aquinas is the same way on just war.
same way, yeah.
Same way. Of course, the difference is this: just war in Christian like Christian just war only applies to Christians. It does not apply to Muslims or pagans or Jews. So if a Christian empire wanted to attack Muslims, they don't have to follow just war. They can just declare a holy war, which they often did, and they can attack people for having the wrong beliefs. It happens throughout the history of Christianity. Uh, in Islamic traditional theories of war, only the caliph could order an offensive war, right? It couldn't just be done by anybody. But what people don't know is today there's a near consent. I would say there's a consensus of Muslim jurists today, like present times, that offensive war is not allowed. Like there's no legitimate offensive war on Islamic grounds today anymore, basically.
Yeah,
And a lot of people
yeah,
don't know this. Like a lot of Christians don't. There's so much fear of Muslims. Sometimes, people like I'll meet people online and they'll say, "Oh, I'm scared of Muslims. Like I think somebody's gonna attack me any moment." Like I meet people who have this phobia. So it's unfortunate, basically,
yeah.
and
I
on
mean, it's
still
always
happen.
this. It's always this, like I would always think, what a bizarre thing to, like. Okay, like at least, not always, I guess, but like now I always think like, um it you have to think about geopolitical issues making those people angry,
Mm.
right? Like, why are those Muslims, right? Like, as these people are like scared of all this Islamophobia, like, why, like, they just don't seem to think like, look, you bombed, like, your country or something bombed their country a lot. A lot of people died, a lot of people suffered, including women and children. So it's like, don't you think that that's the thing that, like, is making them angry? Like, probably majority of the time than just like pure. religious stuff, right? It's like, and Sam Harris, Sam Harris just terrible, just terrible at this, right? And like basically, apostate prophet like the Ridwan and like David Wood, they basically regurgitate like Sam Harris talking points and all that stuff about like they just um keep just essentializing. And I always think like these people don't have any self-awareness, right? It's
No, because
like,
they just have an agenda, right? Like they're almost like entertainers. They I don't think they have jobs. I think this is all they do full time. Like they just get money on Patreon and stuff. So they've all these people, they're sort of entertainers now. And
yeah,
you know how the algorithm works, right? Like the
yeah,
more
yeah,
controversial you are, the more engagement you get, you know? Daniel Hakikachu is the same way. I don't like the guy, I really don't,
yeah,
but the guy,
yeah,
he knows how to do well in this industry.
yeah,
You
yeah,
know, he
like,
does. And
yeah, I mean,
same with David Wood and Apostate Prophet and Michael Jones and all these guys who do YouTube full time. Like this is all they do. So there, you watch it. Same with Cameron Bertuzzi. People have been criticizing Cameron because of the way he's like promoting things. But this is their livelihood, so everything becomes more and more controversial. Otherwise,
yeah,
you
it's
don't
always
get the clicks.
drama, it's
Right?
always
Like
drama.
nobody watches my channel's videos, right? Like it's too academic, this sort of thing. So that's just the world we inhabit right now.
Yeah, and one last thing I want to say, yeah, I want to share is this like video by Kevin Non-Tradicath. Like right now he's agnostic. He became like he was a traditional Catholic at one point. Then he
Okay.
became an agnostic. Wait, let me just also like turn on the audio too of that video. So, like he basically talked about there's a view in Christianity there, or there was, maybe it still exists, which is a kind of view of like mass damnation, right? Which is that majority of human beings, a large amount of them, will be condemned to eternal hell, right? That's the prediction of like I think Aquinas, like he talks about this. So let me I'm going to start the play the videos. Tell me if you hear his voice or not.
And the title of that sermon is The Little Number of Those Who Are Saved.
You heard it?
Yeah.
Okay. So this is the video where he talks about. So let me play this.
The entire sermon can be found for free online and is linked in the description of The Saved. There is a sermon preserved by St. Leonard of Port Maurice, and the title of that sermon is The Little Number of Those Who Are Saved. The entire sermon can be found for free online and is linked in the description down below, but I would like to summarize and quote from that sermon for you to show you the kinds of things that I was taught growing up trad. St. Leonard starts the sermon by outlining his purpose. He has a dual purpose for this sermon. First, to fill you with dread, I will let the theologians and the fathers of the church decide on the matter and declare that the greater number of Christian adults are damned. And secondly, to attempt to defend the goodness of God versus the godless by proving to you that those who are damned by their own malice because they wanted to be damned.
There are lots of VPNs out.
What the? Sorry about this. Like this is
You need
the
YouTube Premium.
yeah.
Turns to the theologians and the church fathers, starting with the theologians of his day. St. Leonard says that he looks to, quote, two learned cardinals, Cajetan and Bellarmine. Now, this is a little confusing here because St. Leonard is referring to St. Bellarmine, but he's not referring to St. Cajetan. that is another Cajetan. This Cajetan that we're talking about is Cardinal Thomas Cajetan, who is best known as being the head of the Catholic opposition to Martin Luther's Reformation. But that Cardinal Cajetan is not yet canonized and is not the same as Saint Cajetan. Anyway, Saint Leonard says that both cardinals in question agree, but he chooses only to cite Cardinal.
You know what cardinals are like in Catholic Church.
Yeah.
They are like pretty high authority, right? Not just like the normal priests. They are pretty above. They are, I think, even above like bishops, right? Or are like cardinals below bishops? I'm not sure. I think cardinals are above bishops or something.
Yeah, cardinals are higher. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Cajetan, the most common sentiment which is held is that among Christians, there are more damned souls than predestined souls. St. Leonard goes on to say that the Greek fathers all say what Cardinal Cajetan said, and he cites St. Theodore, St. Basil, St. Ephrem, and St. John Chrysostom, but without quoting directly from them, at least here. He does revisit St. John Chrysostom in a minute, but then St. Leonard moves on to the Latin fathers, who he does supply quotes for. You will hear St. Gregory saying clearly, many attain to faith, but few to the heavenly kingdom. St. Anselm declares, there are few who are saved. St. Augustine states even more clearly, therefore, few are saved in comparison to those who are damned. The most terrifying, however, is St. Jerome. At the end of his life, in the presence of his disciples, he spoke these dreadful words. Out of 100,000 people whose lives have always been bad, you will barely find one who is worthy of indulgence. Then St. Leonard does revisit St. John Chrysostom. One day, St. John Chrysostom, preaching in the cathedral in Constantinople and considering those proportions, could not help but shudder in horror and ask, out of this great number of people, how many do you think will be saved? And not waiting for an answer, he added, among so many thousands of people, we would not find 100 who are saved, and I even doubt for the 100. St. Leonard moves to St. Thomas Aquinas, who was considerably more contemporaneous, more recent than the Latin fathers like St. Augustine. Because eternal beatitude surpasses the natural state, especially since it has been deprived of original grace, it is the little number that are saved. And then St. Leonard moves on to telling us that God is still good because we're really all just damning ourselves. Whoever is damned must impute it to his own malice, and that if the greater number of Christians are damned, it is because they want to be. And I must say, I am convinced that this is simply not the case. I can look to myself and say that I don't want to burn in hell for eternity. I am not a practicing Catholic anymore because I no longer believe in the same tenets that I once did. But I am still honestly searching for the truth, and I don't want to be tortured for eternity just because I wasn't intelligent enough to find the truth. And I don't think that I'm unique here. I know tons of both trad Catholics and secular or just at least non-Catholic people, and I don't think that anyone in either group wants to damn themselves to hell. If after we died, we were presented with an all-good God, and we had a clear understanding that this God was indeed perfect goodness itself, we would all pick to spend eternity with that God, unless we could not choose that anymore. I strongly suspect that all of my secular friends would make this decision if indeed the Catholics were right. My Catholic friends, imagine this scenario. Imagine the Gnostics were right. You die and you ascend into the pleroma to dwell with the monad, and you see the faces of the aeons, or whatever the Gnostics believed. It's kind of confusing. That's not important right now. But imagine that was the case. When you find out after your death that the monad is goodness itself, would you choose to spit in the face of the monad and give yourself over to the demiurge? I assume not. I assume that you would be like, wow, this was unexpected. What a twist. But I want to be on the side of perfect goodness. Unless very few of you would actually want to spend your eternity with pure goodness itself, I suspect that the fewness of the saved is not caused by us choosing damnation for ourselves. St. Leonard of Port Maurice's sermon on the fewness of the saved isn't the only disturbing teaching that I was taught as a kid growing up trad. Another one is about whether or not those in heaven can see those in hell, and whether or not they can or are even capable of pitying those in hell. I turn to the Summa, question 94, the relations of saints towards the damned, article 2, whether the blessed pity the unhappiness of the damned. Thomas writes here that mercy or compassion can be in a person in two ways, in the passions or by choice. He argues that the souls in heaven will not have passions anymore, so they can't feel mercy for those in hell through the passion. They would only be able to feel mercy for the souls in hell by choice. Then, Thomas says that we only ever choose to have compassion when we want someone's suffering to be dispelled. And in hell, there is no hope of the suffering ever being dispelled. Therefore, it is impossible for the souls in heaven to pity the souls in hell. Quote, now, mercy or compassion comes of the reason's choice when a person wishes another's evil to be dispelled. In the future state, referring to how we will be in heaven, it will be impossible for them to be taken away from their unhappiness, now referring to those in hell. And consequently, it will not be possible to pity their suffering, the suffering of the souls in hell, according to right reason. Therefore, the blessed in glory will have no pity on the damned. Then, in the very next article, Article 3, Aquinas says that even though the saints in heaven will not rejoice in the suffering of the damned as such, as suffering qua suffering, the saints will indeed rejoice, quote, by reason, namely, of something annexed to it. And in this way, the saints will rejoice in the punishment of the wicked by considering therein the order of divine justice and their own deliverance, which will fill them with joy. And thus the divine justice and their own deliverance will be the direct cause of the joy of the blessed, while the punishment of the damned will cause the joy of the blessed indirectly. My Catholic listeners, do you love anyone? Maybe you have a spouse or kids or just anyone that you love. Can you imagine eternity without them? Knowing that they are suffering? Can you imagine being okay with that? Can you imagine rejoicing in the suffering of your child, their pointless suffering? They suffer with no hopes of ever changing their minds, no hopes of repenting or improving themselves in any way, since apparently those things are impossible after the death of the body. If you are okay with this, if you rejoice in this, then I can only imagine that there is something terribly wrong with your brain chemistry. You have to be a psychopath with no empathy at all to truly believe that you will rejoice in the suffering of your children. When I told my family that I no longer believed, they pleaded with me to even just fake it till I make it because they couldn't imagine the afterlife without me. And I think that when they said this, they betrayed that they disagreed with St. Thomas Aquinas. They did not say to me, oh well, I'll be perfectly happy in heaven with or without you. My happiness in heaven will not be made less by your absence. They did not say that. But that is exactly what the traditional Catholic teaching on the afterlife states. And that is disgusting. I mean that as honestly as I can. That is disgusting. It is appalling. I am disgusted by the idea of the saints rejoicing in the suffering of the damned. I hope you are too. If I was in heaven and my wife was in hell, and if I was not constantly raging at the gates of heaven, trying to get down into hell to be at least with my wife and try to get us both back to heaven, I would just not be me anymore. I would be a robot, a different version of myself, but I wouldn't be me. Luckily, the Catholic Church never dogmatized the entire Summa, never dogmatized the sermon of St. Leonard of Port Maurice. Of course it didn't. Saints can be and have been wrong on plenty of things. And if I were still a practicing Catholic, I would think that St. Thomas and St. Leonard were.
So like this stuff is there. This stuff is there in like Christianity. So I mean, I would always think like, yeah, don't when you live in a glass house, don't throw stones, brother. Right? Like your religion has a lot of horrific stuff in there. I think Islam never had this much, right? I think they would never say like majority of Muslims would go to hell. Even Taimiyya wouldn't say that, I think.
Well, Ibn Taymiyyah thinks hell will end, so people
Oh
can
yeah,
go
yeah,
to
yeah. Sorry,
hell, but
sorry.
then it's
He was a
finished.
universalist. Sorry. I
Yeah,
meant
he
more like,
sort of becomes a universalist of some sort. Yeah.
yeah. Sorry. I meant more like more other Salafis. I think they would say
I
most
mean,
Muslims.
there are some groups who did probably believe the majority goes to hell, but it's not clear. There's a hadith which where the prophet says, "My community will split into 73 sects, and one of them will go to paradise, and the rest will be in hell." But it's a vastly debated hadith, and there's different versions of this, you know. So
Ah,
there's different ways to interpret this, and there are different versions. So I would say that there's been controversy over these things. I don't know of a definitive position that says the majority will go to hell. I don't think that's like a standard or mainstream view among
yeah,
Muslims.
because I think the standard mainstream view in Islam right now is that Muslims go to heaven eventually,
Yes.
everyone.
Yeah, some
Uh,
may go to hell temporarily. Um,
temporarily, yeah.
yeah, but through intercession of the prophet and the believers, they'll eventually go to heaven. That is,
So
I would say that's the main view. Yeah.
so fundamentally, even Islam seems to be like more merciful than like Christianity,
Yeah,
even the
yeah.
mainstream, right?
I mean, that the argument could be made. Yes, it's true.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Okay, great. So this was such a wonderful chat, Khalil. Stick around after like I stop the recording. I want to ask your feedback. So I'm
Yeah.
going to stop the recording now.
Okay.